Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Courageous Leadership Academy Live. If you're new to the channel, I'm Dr. Kelly Waltman, and on this channel, we focus on helping you be a courageous leader. So focusing on communication, all things leadership, strategy, priorities, all the things that can help you be a better leader and be a courageous leader. And certainly today's conversation is no exception. You're all in for a treat today. We have, as a part of our conversation, I'm going to be talking with Eric Landblom about his amazing career and the work he's doing as a part of founding Leadership Developed. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about Eric, and then we'll bring him into the broadcast. So I really can't do his accomplishments justice in this brief intro, but I'm going to do my best. So Eric brings a wealth of leadership experience to our conversation today. From humble beginnings as a student director for college theater productions, I can relate, to becoming a platoon commander for the United States Marine Corps, I cannot relate. Serving multiple deployments to Iraq, becoming a flight instructor, a director of operations, serving in key leadership positions during deployments to Afghanistan and Japan. And there is so much more to his list of accomplishments. And certainly, as you can tell just from that brief intro, Eric is no stranger to leading through uncertainty. In our conversation today, he's going to share what he learned in his 20-plus year career with the United States Marine Corps and the lessons he continues to learn and share in his role as the founder of Leadership Developed. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring Eric into the studio. Hello, Eric.
Hi, Kelly.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on your show. This is a great pleasure to be with you and your audience.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for your service, your years of service and sacrifice. And I think I speak for everybody when I say thank you for that.
Thank you for supporting us. That means a lot. I mean, day and age in which, Dad would tell me about how Vietnam was to how our social structure has changed its view and be able to support our servicemen, men and women out there who are, still currently out there facing, threats that we'll never know about. And it's great that you and the American public has been so good to us in the last, 2002, 2003. I mean, it's been so long that, we've been in this. So I appreciate it. And I know my fellow service members do too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it has been a long journey for sure. Yeah. So what I'd like to give my guests the opportunity to share anything else that they would like to share as an introduction, for yourself, and also a chance to talk a little bit more about what you do with Leadership Developed.
Well, you pretty much hit the most important parts, which was, the experiences, the opportunities that were given and the challenges to overcome to get to those opportunities, being a platoon commander of an infantry platoon while you're, then letting that highlight itself to say, hey, you want to be a pilot? I'm like, okay, I'll try to learn how to be a pilot. With these people with degrees in engineering, physics, things like that. And I'm going, I got to compete with these people. But those were great relationships that helped me become a better person. And then the opportunities continued on growing. Through retirement, I went through University of Georgia's executive MBA program. And during that time, I was interviewing for, jobs with, and I get hiring managers that were executives. But the one that impacted me the most was this job interview with a CEO of a company. And he bluntly put it as you Marine leaders, that you just tell them what to do and they do what you say. I'm like, There's that scene in Breakfast Club where Judd Nelson's character is like, I don't think so, bud. To me, I wanted to so much, but at the same time, trying to come down to being a good civilian person now, we had a conversation about it. We talked about it. And that what led to the creation of Leadership Developed, in which I wanted to explain that what people see as from military leaders isn't what you think it is. That's years of relationship building. That's years of, and we're going to talk about how that, why the military services are successful at leading during uncertainty is because of what you do on the front side, the preparatory work. And so I really wanted leadership development to focus on what does a young service member who led, I don't care if it's 4 people, 5,000 people, or Commandant in the Marine Corps right now has 176,000 people. But the success they had was the relationships they built and the confidence that they gave to stakeholders and the people that were with them on the teams. So
That's great. Yeah, that definitely resonates a lot with me, and I think will resonate with everybody. And that's such a great point to make, that front end work. I say something very similar when I talk with people about helping cultivate a feedback culture. You can't just sit down one day in a staff meeting and say, okay, we have a safe space for dialogue, everybody, and expect people to feel comfortable and to feel like they can open up and share. You have to do that work to get to that place. And that's a perfect example of that.
I have some unorthodox way of doing that with a bunch of closed mouth managers I had, and it paid off. And my wife was a very key in helping me set that up. So I understand what it means to build those spaces and how to have that, leadership team be able to trust each other, have not, to know that they can say something and not have any repercussions from it.
Right. Well, and yeah, I would imagine. I mean, obviously that's a key piece in, civilian life, business, workplace culture, having that sense of trust, but that's absolutely got to be magnified when you're deployed and your life is literally in somebody else's hand. I mean, that trust has to be there, right?
Oh yes, definitely. It's one of those things where there's a saying, and it gets every time I listen to my fellow service members who are now doing consulting, they say the same thing. I trust you with my life. When we talk about how we trust, there's so much. I don't know somebody from, a guy across the state, somebody who grew up in let's say downtown LA, and I grew up in Dickinson, North Dakota, which is totally culturally and socially so far apart from each other, but yet at the same time we were able, through the training, the relationships, and the people, that eventually 6 degrees of separation you find, in which people now are saying, yes, I know who you are, I know this guy, I know he worked with you, yep, we can go a long ways. And you'd be surprised, especially in the battlefield, I'll say the battlefield, but being out there and just running into people. I remember during the invasion, I showed up late. I was finishing up flight school, and then when I deployed to Iraq the day after my evaluation flight with my best friend, and he and I went out there, and I ran into so many people that I was enlisted with that they're like, hey, can we go with you guys? Can we go with you guys? Because they knew who I was from my past. And so anybody that wore our patch, these infantry guys were like, hey, Major, or Lieutenant Landblom, can we go with you guys? Can you help us out? And so, those rapports really go a long ways, because it goes to, like I said, it goes to how you train, and how you prepare. And it's the same process that's trusted over and over, because it's reiterated, refined, and then brought up to date as technology changes.
Right.
And not to say that there's things that don't creep in that makes it a little difficult, or a change of times, or a change of pressures. But you learn, those are the learning curves, or the learning pains that go with, the advancement of technology, the advancement of relationships, the advancement of anything.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So in thinking about, I mean, on one level, this can seem like a common sense thing, but I think I like to define, concepts and what we're talking about. So in thinking about the concept of leading through uncertainty, like what does that mean to you? What comes to mind when you think about it?
This one is one I collaborated with my wife on, just to make sure that we put the words together. It's pretty much, we are, you're making a timely decision with very limited information, using reasonable amount of confidence, knowing that you have full ownership of the consequences, and if especially if those consequences fail. Jocko Wilkins and Leif Babin of the SEAL Team 6. They have a book called Extreme Ownership, and they talk about how combat is reflective of life. It's just that the consequences of decisions are magnified and intensified, and they immediately happen. And so that's where decision making in upfront, that front load training that we talk about, that comes a long ways. So decision making process is quicker, trusted by people above and below, and communicated well. And we'll talk about communication as well with that as we go on.
Yeah. I think this is a topic that is important and relevant at any point in time, because no matter what, as a leader, you're bound to face some level of uncertainty. It's just the nature of life, right? It's expected. But certainly, this past year and everything that people have had to deal with, and sometimes I hesitate, do I even bring it up? But you have to bring it up. I mean, that's it's the reality. That we've dealt with situations and a reality that no one could have predicted. Nobody, was expecting. So I love the way that you defined that. And I think that is so relevant. And I think, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're in a better place now than we were a year ago. But to think that we're right ahead and just, that we're about done, I think would be very misguided. So I think that definition and that concept is fantastic as we continue to work our way through all of this. And I think as we continue through this conversation, those lessons and concepts that you share are going to be so applicable for what people need to continue to deal with in still very uncertain times. Yeah.
Well, it was for this situation, the uncertainty wasn't that it was, a fog, a big fog. It required many, many actionable events from various different organizations and individuals to actually collaborate at the same time to create, or to pretty much, we call it in problem framing, the impression of the mess. We have to know what the challenge is. We have to know what the problem is to be able to. So when we talk about COVID, and everyone was like going, all right, just, like the flu, right? And no, you have to go in through the whole, how do we study this? How do we put in action? It took a lot of organizations to come together. It couldn't come from one person, one organization to say, hey, we got the answer. This is how it's going to go. It took many. And so you find when you're dealing in uncertainty, you have to define is the uncertainty because it's a fog, or it require actionable advance from various stakeholders that need to come together and collaborate.
Right.
And those are to me is how I would define the differences in uncertainties that are out there.
Right. That's really good. And thinking then, I think that's a good segue for us to talk about, some of those key components of leading through uncertainty. What are those key things, whether you think about as components or steps, what are those key things that leaders should be aware of when leading through uncertainty?
Okay, so I'm going to break it down in three phases. Three phases. The preparation, the preemptive stuff, right? What can you do first? First of all, I talked about training, and that's where the trust is really built. But what it also does, it teaches and creates decision-making abilities. It first defines, who has the ability to make decisions, who has, and all that other stuff. So I love how Dwight D. Eisenhower says, plans are worthless, but planning is indispensable. And it's so true because, yes, I'm going to talk about, having a contingency plan published and ready to go for, anything, but it's only as good as the situation, and it only should be a backbone and not the playbook. But the planning process needs to be created. So you need to create a planning process, and there's many different ways, great examples that are out there, and then you have to practice it. You have to really get it down to a point. I like I created, I didn't create one. I adapted a process that I use when talking through, hey, how do you create, for your organization, how do you create a planning process? Because everyone's like going, well, what do you want to do? And then they feel like you got to spend, 3 months of trying to figure out how to create a planning process or research what planning processes are. When, I think we can get faster out there because there's a good good knowledge base out there of people who do create the stuff, that create the planning process, and helps do workshops to do the scenario based type training, because then you're going to learn what that means, or what that will do for you and your team, your leadership team, most importantly, because if you're depending on one person to make all the decisions, you can be in a time hole or a time lag forever. And yeah, and so the hierarchy of decision making gets kind of defined and refined, because as you create this process, the bottom up decision makers are going to be going, hey, I don't know if you guys see it from your side, but from our side, we see this. And now everyone has a good situational awareness of what is seen from the lower ranks and what's being seen from the higher ranks. And that's very important in the planning, to have that nailed out. So when you have to go into an actionable event in the regular phase or in the actionable phase, you're ready to go.
Right.
That's my preemptive phase. During phase, I don't know if I like the statement or if it's a statement that got me out of doing certain chores, but let the situation develop.
Okay.
So
I like that.
I do too, but then as a staff officer, I think I said it a little bit too much for my commanders, and they're like going, well, prod it and see if it moves,
Right.
And so those are, and they're right. We can't sit there staring at the open danger area and not seeing anything, and we know we have to cross it. So how are we going to, time is everything. Timing is everything. So how do we spring the trap? How do we let the scenario play itself out, so now we can do what we need to do to move forward?
Right.
And so that was the one thing that, I see a lot of good leaders get in trouble because they want to keep moving, but they won't let the situation develop from the people who are on the scene or in the area.
Right.
I think I saw one of the best examples. I was somehow a fly on the wall in General McChrystal, who's a SOCOM special ops commander.
Mm-hmm.
He has his own group right now, but he said something that just stuck with me and a whole bunch of us staff officers, and that was, he was in his headquarters talking to somebody one of his team leaders in Afghanistan. He goes, look, I trust you. You're the guy there. You know what's going on. You see what's going on. I trust your decision-making ability. What resources can I give you?
Wow.
That I total trust to a young officer who is like going, I got a vote of confidence. This guy just injected so much confidence in me to be a decision maker, to properly, convey what's going on and let me own it.
Right.
That ownership goes a long ways. I mean, I don't know out in other communities, but like for me and my peers, we were big on, I want to own it. Don't just let me own it. Just, you got a project for me? It's mine. I'm gonna take it. We want to run with it. And it was one of those things that we want to be able to say it's on me, because it's not that I do depend on other people, but it comes, the buck stops here.
Right.
And plus that allows more trust, more confidence, more abilities. And like how, all of us used to complain, is like, how come I get all these jobs? Well, when you're dependable, they go to you, and you want to be dependable. Otherwise, you're getting phased out and never making that next rank.
Yes. Yeah. That's the joke, right? What the reward you get, especially in public sector government work, the reward you get for a good job is more work. That's
exactly.
Well, and before you move on to your next phase, I don't want to ruin your rhythm there, but in thinking about, I just wanted to tease out a couple of things you said there, because it's really valuable information. And thinking about the planning piece, and I really love the way you describe that, and I think that is so true to, have that spelled out in terms of who's responsible for what, and then letting the situation develop, letting people try it, letting them run with it, giving that ownership. It is so tempting, I think, for a lot of leaders, especially if they know, like, okay, this way might not work out. It's very tempting to step in, but sometimes you got to let the situation develop and let people figure it out. That's how you're going to grow. And and that ownership piece, I think, is spot on. And thinking about, nothing is going to crush someone like micromanaging. Like you said, if you're going to give this to me, let me run with it, and I'll come to you when I need to, and I'll get help where I need it. But let me take ownership of this and run with it. And I think that's a great point and lesson in just everyday, everyday management and leadership. But particularly with uncertainty, because we don't know for sure what's going to work. We don't know for sure how things are going to play out. And so letting somebody try it, let the situation develop, and then, take a look at it and see what needs to happen next. That's great advice.
Oh yeah. Well, going off to what, letting them run with it, what I found with, like got some executives, and they're like, they're afraid to go tell the boss why it failed, or they feel like they're getting drugged into the office because they're at fault. And what I found to be changing accountability point of view, change the point of view of what accountability is going into that office, going into that room of the board of directors and saying, look, this is the situation we had. This is what we planned. These are the things we anticipated. These are the things we assumed. Yeah, that's another one.
I have a video on that.
But then this happened, and it threw us it threw us off. So we try to react to it, and we did, and it went poorly. Now we're re-establishing ourselves. If you use those terms, if you work in those terms, and not saying it's IT's fault because they couldn't get the funding from finance, it's not. You're still owning it. You're explaining the story of how the plan came about, and how the plan came about. What was the situation? What was the environment like?
Right.
I can remember many times where I did something, I made a bad decision with an aircraft, and I went into the commanding officer's office, and then, we have the conversation. I got to go flying again because his ownership, it was a good explanation and not throwing a bunch of excuses about how bad the aircraft was maintained, or how air traffic controllers were giving me, or as getting shot at, or anything like that. It was not blaming. It was, this is the environment. This is the situation. This is how I made my judgments or my decisions.
Right.
And that's, I think decision-making and training decision-making is the greatest trust builder in a organization.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. So I think I paused what you were going to say for an additional component of.
Oh, the afterwards. The afterward is the reflection and documenting.
Yes.
I think that's the phase I'm in right now in my career. I'm in that reflect and document phase of what did I learn from this, and what, how is this can be valuable when it, I get to go back onto another adventure, and somebody asks me, hey, can you take charge of something? I have, all these green notebooks of, after actions of, advice or criticisms of how I performed. I mean, I can still I still have it written down. These books are sitting right here on this desk, and I can pull them out and say, oh yeah, I remember I made a bad decision here. And this is what they were expecting me to do, because it wasn't, you try to be predictable for your recovering units and things like that. So,
Right.
It's very important to reflect and document. And plus, reflection allows you to get closure with it. A lot of people, I mean, I still have things that I'm still hanging on to that, I was like, God, I could have done that better. I'm afraid to tell. I'm scared. I'm really scared to tell this story. But this is where I screwed up, and this is where I learned. And ever since then, I have not fallen that low before again. So.
Right. Yeah, I think that is a very key piece, that that willingness and that exercise of reflecting and debriefing and saying, okay, this is what worked well, or this is what's going well. Here's where we can improve. I think that is a vital piece. Whether you're talking about a specific project, you're talking about, as people have been adapting to the pandemic and, looking, okay, this is what we've done for the last 3 months. This is what's worked well. This isn't what's working well. And, another key piece that you mentioned in there that I just wanted to highlight was, you talked about involving and talking with people from the bottom up. And, soliciting that input from everybody, not just, the people who are in the office and not seeing what's happening day to day, really getting the feedback and the input from those people who are facing the consequences, dealing with the actions, doing everything day to day, that is so crucial. But I think often leaders miss that step. They think they know what should happen and they do it, and then forget to follow up with people and see how it's actually working.
Oh yeah, and I think it's funny is that's probably where so it's top down planning, bottom up refinement, and it's very. I think when I hear from the guys about, hey sir, can we talk about this? I'm like, doors wide open, please, because that means if it's important to you to have the courage to come talk to me, past I think like 6 layers of management between him and me, that's important to the young person, the young man, the young woman, because if it's that important to them to have that courage, then it's got to be important to everyone else. Or as a leader, I'm going to make it important to them, because it's not out of force. I want them to want it. I want them to understand why, the young 18-year-old boy fresh from the farm who's now in harm's way, or who's working on an aircraft that's always putting you in harm's way, whether it's peacetime or not, and how he fits in, or what he knows, or what he observes, or what he sees. It's not that he's being a tattletale or anything. He's trying to understand his place in the big picture.
Right.
And that's, I always made sure that was my first operational piece. Hey, what is everyone's role in my big picture? And, I had this big old drawn out whiteboard of everyone, just so they knew when I say, hey, we're going to, the vision's here. Here's how you're going to contribute to that vision. And, these young men and women they just want to come in the office and stare at it, because now they feel it. Now they feel they're with it. And that's that bottom up refinement that goes a long ways. I was talking with the executives in my MBA course, and they were talking about the power of, finally hearing from somebody who, that works out on the line, the customer facing, who like, you're trying to implement a plan that sounds great on paper, but the reality is I have to deal with this, and that. Did you take that into consideration? Right. Most of the times it's like they're getting their information from, like the telephone game. I got from this guy, who got from this guy, who got from this guy, who got from this guy, and he's, it's regurgitated, and he's trying to process what is being said there. So he has his point of view being so much different than the person who's actually doing it.
Right.
And, I was surprised, I hear about these great gatherings, I guess, where people get, they come together, they tell the vision, and the bottom up raises a hand. And it's like, and I'm great that corporations and organizations do that, but how small businesses do they do that, And so that bottom up refinement is so key to having a good plan be better.
Absolutely. That is, I think, I don't know if you knew when you did that vision board vision, if you do the research behind that, or if that was just something intuitive for you, but that is huge. There's a ton of research that shows how motivating that is for people to understand where they fit into the bigger picture and to understand that bigger why. And it doesn't, you can have the most mundane, routine task to do, but if you understand how that small piece fits into that bigger picture, that means everything in terms of helping people feel connected to that bigger vision, feel motivated. So that, absolutely, that is a key piece. And you know, and I think there's two sides to that coin of absolutely when the people that are on the you know, the top end of the org chart, when they are making plans,
Mm-hmm.
understanding and soliciting that feedback from people who actually have to implement them,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to do so in a more productive way. But then, yeah, the opposite is true. Even if ultimately what needs to be implemented people aren't going to love, if they
Right.
understand the why behind it, then they're more likely to say, okay, I don't love this, but I get it and I'll do
Oh,
it.
yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, that
I mean,
communication.
I had some leaders that were good about so like flight in, you know, in large flight missions. I had a couple leaders that were like, they go down to the maintenance department, they would grab the most junior crew chief and they'd make him sit there, and poor crew chief's like going, I'm gonna be bored listening to these, you know, higher ups talking about plans and how they're gonna do this. And then but he was like going, no, how does this impact you? I don't know, sir. How does it? It's like, and then he goes through the scenario. He like lives it with the young Marine talking about it, and then goes, well, I got to worry about this. I got to worry about that. And he goes, good, thank you. And then, you know, those are pieces of information that made him he's a real good planner. This, you know, he's a great example for me growing up, just to watch him of how he interacted with people, because his plans, you know, as simple as they were, considered a lot of variables, which was the human variable itself.
Right.
So I'm really impressed with, you know, that type of person.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great when you can have role models like that.
Well, yeah. Especially when they're your peers. Yeah. If
Yeah.
if you have a peer that's a role model, I think that's gold,
Right.
because you guys are growing up the same way, and you have interaction. It's easier to interact with somebody, your peer, than it is up or down. So I mean,
Yeah. Are there other aspects of things that you think leaders should role model, you know, as you're thinking about leading through uncertainty, other things that are beneficial for leaders to do?
um, it's that, you know, it's going to be your character. It's going to be the leader's character. The humility piece, you know, we all talk about in leadership. It's, you know, it's not about your legacy as a leader. It's your organization's legacy.
Mm.
My squadron was the Purple Foxes, and they were known from Vietnam as being one of the most trusted casualty evacuation squadrons during Vietnam. And it was important when we went to Iraq in 2003. You know, our commander's boss, like, you're the Purple Foxes. You have a legacy. You need to live up to that legacy. And, you know, pilots are naturally have ego as it is, because of the, you know, you have the way you make decisions and the way you have to, you know, make things happen. But at that time, it was like, that was a realization of, you're right, we have a legacy to maintain here. And by the time I showed up, they were like, come here, Lieutenant, this is our legacy. And you get a whole history lesson on what the squadron has done up until you showed up. And then it wasn't about the commanding officer and the, you know, how he got to be, you know, great things he did to be a commander. It wasn't about the weapons tactics instructor, who's our best pilot, right? How he got to that position. It was, you're going to contribute to this legacy. How do you want to contribute to this legacy? And
Wow.
that, and still sticks with me. There's the Purple Foxes are still operating out of Southern California. They've done some great things with that as they transition to the Osprey from the helicopter. And that legacy is bigger than any commanding officer, any pilot, any crew chief, any maintainer, anybody, because that's how the culture was built. Now, everyone outside the squadron thinks we're a bunch of clowns, but at the same time, that was our legacy.
Right.
We got the job done our way.
Right. Yeah.
So that's where going into that, yeah, that whole character of humility comes into play for a leader, especially in uncertainty. It's not about, I'm going to take us through this, you know, great disaster and we're going to come on top because of me. No, it's not. It's always because the team came together. The situational awareness was collectively built. You know, I don't know everything. I can't see everything. I need to be communicated to me what somebody else sees, how they point of view, interpret the information, things like that. And so you really have to understand, that it is the collaborative effort is very important. And I'm not going to take away from the individual. I don't want to take away from the individual, because the individual is there to, there's pride, there's ownership, there's all that goes into it. And when they are, part of the group, but they know that it's them that did that, and then this person brought in their piece, it's all goodness. And I have rarely seen things go the wrong way because of that mentality or that culture.
Right. Yeah, that's a really great way to put it, thinking about that idea of, and again, it ties to that bigger why, that bigger picture, but that idea of legacy, and that it really is about coming together for that bigger picture and that legacy. And yeah, like you said, it doesn't detract from the individual. The individual is important, and they have an essential contribution. That's the word I'm looking for, an essential contribution to that mission and that legacy. But it really is bigger than just them. That's a really great way to put that. Yeah. So in thinking, and we've talked a little bit about this so far, this has been woven into our conversation, but I just want to see if there's anything more specifically that you'd like to touch on in the idea of the role of communication when it comes to leading through uncertainty, because, I'm a big proponent of communication all of the time, but during uncertainty, that's going to be amplified. And so, what can you talk a little bit about the role of communication when leading through uncertainty?
I'm gonna sound like a sci-fi freak here, but it's the force that binds the world together. The whole communication piece is so important. It reassures each other, it notifies each other, it brings us together, it makes us feel like, makes the team, it creates the trust, and trust builds the relationship. I can think of an example where I was in Afghanistan, not doing my pilot job, but doing my staff job, and being a air controller for combat troops out, and to be able to get aircraft to combat troops. And the hardest thing with a lack of communication was, where are they? Are they okay? Did something happen? Are they, did a bad guys pop up that we weren't expecting? And, it gets nerve-wracking, and mostly you start second-guessing yourself then. Even for you as the individual, you start second-guessing yourself because you're not getting feedback. Especially when there's like we call it zip lip or no-com portions of a mission. The communication, the verbal communication or the electronic communication, anything that is very important in keeping confidence that this is working. I can tell you many times that if I couldn't see it, I want to hear it. And it's very important to be able to know that that it's there, that everything's in place, everything's moving correctly or within your expectations. It's kind of like, your parents let's say your parents are driving cross country and they're coming to visit you, and you haven't heard from them in 3 days. You get nervous. Are they okay? And then they finally talk to you. Oh yeah, we stopped in Grand Canyons and we camped out there, and like, I thought you were in a hospital. I thought, it's those, because your imagination goes crazy. Well, it's the same for everybody, either the leader, the management between, or the guys out front. They get very, they're going to get not paranoid, but they're going to get self-conscious. They're going to be worried. Everyone does. It's just a human nature in which communication helps bind it all together and making sure that everything, information's flowing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it really is such an essential piece, everything we've talked about so far, in terms of going through those different phases and, thinking about role modeling and just everything we've talked about really, encapsulated and thinking about that communication and how that can make or break all of the other components and everything that you're trying to do. And, that's an excellent point too, in thinking about, when you're on a mission like the one you're describing and you lose that communication, I can't even imagine how, the feeling that would come from that. And, obviously that is a different example than just day-to-day business communication, but the lesson is still there. The truth is still there, that it's essential to, to thriving and to surviving, whether you're talking literal life or death, or you're talking about business, that really is essential to success.
I've seen, or I failed in communicating when I was a young leader because I thought, all right, you put me in charge, I own it all. I'm just taking care of me and my team. We're doing it, and I don't have to tell anybody. And I remember when that commanding officer reached down, pulled me up to his office, and was like, "What's going on? How are you doing? What help do you need?" And it's like, "We got it, sir." So it's like, let me know these things, otherwise I worry. My parents worry about their kids worry about their parents when they get,
Yep.
People worry when there's no communication.
Yeah. And, even if you've decided that communication can be minimal, if you've decided that, okay, this is our schedule for communication, or these are the things I need to know, but at least that's the plan, that communication is there. But don't know, and it's just left open, then I can see that.
We had a group. I was in a squadron that we had our unwritten rule was silence is consent. So, whether we're just hanging out or we were at work, silence was consent, because it was just a matter of keep moving, because we were highly proficient at that time of what we were doing. I think we were flight instructors, and we were just, we're just trying to help, I got this student, and we're just moving on. So it was like, hey, I got this, silence, consent, continue. And what ended up happening, it created, when you move on to your next group or your next circle that you'd be part of, it really forces them out, or kind of comes off standoffish, I guess. It doesn't really help building that trust, because you have to rebuild it. So every time you go from one unit to another unit, you have to reprove yourself. Like General Berger, who's the current commandant right now, he was my boss, and his last words to me before we left Afghanistan is like, all right, Eric, you've done some good things here, but you know what? They don't know you. They don't know what you did here. I could tell them you're the best thing, but they want you to be the best for them.
Right.
So figure out how you can communicate that. Figure out how you're going to create trust and confidence to be, and you're going to go and you're going to move along. And that was probably one of the best conversations I had with a senior member who gave me a good role model mentorship time to say, hey, look, this is what's going on, because that set me up for success in one of the, going from one ugly situation to, combat to another ugly situation, which was a misfit of a staff, in which then the reactions and actions that I brought with me paid off dividends to help forming a solid team and help me move along as well, where I was given trust to have a greater, my best assignment afterwards was after that.
That's
so
great.
that comes into play very much.
Yeah. So in thinking about, as leaders are trying to effectively deal with uncertainty, I would think that being able to effectively prioritize, what needs to be addressed first. Like how can leaders effectively prioritize, what to do when they're dealing with crisis or uncertainty?
Well, they've done that in the setup, in the previous to the events, because you have to create that priority up front. So if you say people first, you need to show people first. Your website, better have people before it has, the CEO's face on there. It talk about, if you're going to do that, you need to commit to it from the beginning. You can't just say, oh, only in a time of crisis, people are first. So you really have to have that part of your core values. And that's, your vision, your mission statement, your core values, those three things will carry you through anything. I can think of just being, we were in Iraq, and I had a bad moment in where my aircraft caught on fire. I had to set it down. I was the only aircraft flying in that region of Iraq, and I had to set it down in the middle of nowhere, and nobody knew I went down.
Oh my
And the
goodness.
uncertainty of where the bad guys were, what was wrong with the aircraft, I had to fix it. I made some bad decisions, assuming, oh, this is fixable. Let's worry about landing this thing, then call some help. And I'm like, I put this aircraft in a location to be protective, but I could not get a radio signal to anybody. And so the Marine Corps core values kicks in: the honor, the courage, the commitment. And so the honor was, me and 6 people are in the middle of the desert we don't know where the bad guys are. We are 20 miles away from safety. The terrain is a little bit on the rugged side, and we have this large U.S. government property that needs to be taken care of and brought back to safety for national security reasons. I honor those things. That's the honor. The courage is, all right, own it. What are we going to do about it? And then commitment. We commit to the plan. And that's where, those core values of the Marine Corps carried me in my lack of decision making at that time to getting us effectively recovered, effectively secured, effectively brought back home. Is because we went to, what's the vision of the Marine Corps? To win the country's battles. Well, I just wanted to survive and get home. The mission statement was to provide medium lift support to all U.S. Marines and armed service members. I have 5 armed service members with me. I need to get them back to safety. And so that's where the vision, the mission statement, and the core values carries you through in prioritizing what's important. I'm sorry that sounds vague, but it's
not at all. I think that's a great way to frame that and think about that. And I hadn't really thought about it that way and kind of connected those 2 dots before. That, I mean, it makes sense. And now as you're explaining it that way, I think of examples. There's a story of, I think was it Johnson and Johnson that owns Tylenol. And when there was those bottles that were tampered with all those years ago, and their core mission was taking care of people, and so they recalled all of those bottles, which cost them millions of dollars, but they had decided ahead of time that their priority and their mission and their vision was providing and caring for people. So even though I can think of that example now, I honestly hadn't thought about it that way. That idea of what you have made your priority, your core values, and your culture, that is your roadmap during times of uncertainty.
Exactly.
So that, I think that's a great answer and a great way to think about that. And as people are thinking about those things and continue, especially now we're at the beginning of a year, as they're looking at this year and looking at how they lead their teams, if they don't have that clearly defined, that's a great place to start. So I think that's great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So are there, that's a great way to think about how to prioritize. And then it's really, that's a great roadmap for you. And you've shared some stories, and I appreciate you sharing both the things that have gone well and some of the things that you've learned from. Are there common mistakes that you see leaders make when they're trying to lead through uncertainty or make decisions? Are there kind of common mistakes or pitfalls?
One is trying to be the hero too early. Trying to be I get it. As a leader, you're like, it's my responsibility. I own this. These are the people that are coming to me or looking to me. Well, yeah, they're looking to you, but they also want to contribute. I loved this guy. It wasn't that he wasn't well liked. He was just different, and he just had a coarse way of talking to people. But I love the way he handled the situation where we were getting aircraft prepared to fly into another, larger Air Force, jetliner going down to Chile. And as these aircraft are broken apart to be packaged into this, the firefighting system sprinklers go off, and all these exposed parts, engines, transmissions. And I just remember the staff sergeant was like, he came, we were all out there. I mean, my boss, me, all of our people were like going, they all wanted to do something. All wanted to go into action. And I loved how Staff Sergeant just looked it over. Sir, I'll be right back. In a course, manner, and goes running in, comes back with a cell phone and this big maintenance manual. And I'm like, we already have these things torn apart. What are you going to find in there? And he's like going, somebody needs to go in there and find out if that retardant is chemical based or water based. And I'm like going, if it's chemical based, who's going to walk in there? Well, he's pointing out at the guys that are already in there in the foam, right? In the foam party. And they're, going towards, is like, he calls out and he's making it happen. Even though I'm there and my boss is there, he's there taking control, taking that ownership. And it wasn't that he rushed into it. He sat there and he stared at it as everyone's, throwing their hands in there going, oh, great, our mission's a disaster. We're not going to go down to South America. And he had the presence of mind to stop, take a look at the situation, put some common sense together. I mean, he had his wits about him. He was like, okay, new challenge. Because he was my night crew chief. He's the guy that took care of the night crew while I get to go home, because he always wanted me to go home when he was in charge. And he's like, I got this. And he was great at being able to find the answers, make an actual, even if it wasn't the perfect answer, it was good enough for us to be able to be finished with it because it was a Friday going into the weekend, and we were able to clean out the area, get the aircraft ready to go by sunset that Friday, and take off. I think, and then I took off with the first load of aircraft that morning on Monday, and we didn't miss a beat. Now, there were some things on the backside that we had to learn how to work through, but Staff Sergeant's ability to just, remove himself from the emotional situation. I admit I was emotionally going, oh my God, my favorite. I've been looking forward to this trip forever. It's the first deployment, not going to combat,
Right.
And, I'm emotionally involved, and I was like, this ain't no thing. We got this, sir. And I'm like, I hope so. He did awesome with it. And I was always, I sing his praises when he gets, for job interviews, and I'm his reference. Those are the type of people that you want to step up. And leaders need to allow those people to have that moment, to be that hero. You don't have to be the hero every time.
Right.
And so that's one pitfall that they fall into. And I get it. Trust me, I want to be the hero too. But if I'm not in the situation or position to be there, and somebody else is, then you have to default to it. You have to say, hey, look, you got a better situation awareness of this than I do. You got the lead. And that's what, another example is in flying. When you fly with more than one aircraft in the flight, you have the administrative leader, the flight lead, right? But we have what's also called a tactical lead. And that's the guy with the best situation. So I can tell you that, we're flying into some Ramadi, middle of the night on goggles. Lights are bright as day, but you can't find the landing zone, which is a black piece of dirt in the middle of the city on goggles. And I just remember the lead aircraft was telling me, hey, I can't see it. It's like, I got in sight. He goes, okay, you're the lead, bring us in.
Right.
And that switch, allowing that switch to happen goes a long ways for safety reasons and for the just completion of the mission. And so those are very important to be able to understand. I don't have the answers, but you do. You've got it. And my favorite is, I've never been charged before, and I love those guys. I love it when it's like, oh, I'm not a leader. I don't lead anything, until it's like, oh, you're the duty expert, and you know what's going on. You know how to handle this. And they're like, oh, I wish I listened to your lectures earlier.
Yeah. Oh, those are great lessons for sure. Being willing to, and like you said, not trying to be the hero all the time and too fast, because ultimately if the people that you're responsible for, if you let them kind of have ownership over that, and they look good, you're going to look good, so
Right.
like ultimately you're going to look good either way. So you don't have to be the primary person and and take all the credit. It's going to make you look good.
Right.
And I love that too, about letting the person who, as you say, is in the best situation, who has the most information, is really in the best position to make the decision, deferring to them and letting them do that and supporting that. And that is, I've worked for bosses in the past who have done that. And I've worked for bosses in the past who didn't care. They were the boss. What they said goes.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. And that is, very deflating for the person. And you're not doing your agency, your organization, your business any favors by operating that way.
No, and that destroys relationships real quickly. I can think of a scenario where boss's boss, my boss's boss was switching out, and we love this guy because he was the guy that was like, what's going on? You got the lead. Southern California was on fire in 2014, May of 2014, right? Wildfires, and one was in my neighborhood. And I remember my boss's boss was like, so who's in the lead of the mission? I raised my hand and goes, well, which fire do you want to fight? And then, I get my smile going, and I'm like going, I'm going to go with San Marcos and go save my neighborhood. And he goes, you know what? That's going to be good for the community. Take your team, go do that. And, we got to do that. Now, fast forward when the change of command happened and we get the new guy. He's the funniest guy in the room. He's the smartest guy in the room. And he just wants to know why we're not performing to where he expects us to be. And it's like, all right, I guess we don't have the rapport that I had with the other boss's boss. So I'll do the best with the situation I have to give you the best that we can do.
Right.
And, you feel like you just had your arm tied behind your back. And I can imagine what it is as it goes down the hierarchy, the org chart. I usually call those org charts the pile of BS, because when you're on the bottom, you got to deal with all that comes on top of you, and
right.
It's not fair to those guys. So I have to use my experience of when I was that fresh from boot camp, Lance Corporal, E3, all those people above me, and I gotta remember, I tell myself, okay, what was it like when I was down there when I heard things like that, or when somebody made a decision that didn't ask for our input at the bottom? And those are very important. Those were important lessons that I brought with me, and that I saw my peers take with them as well, and adapt into their ability to make decisions.
Right. So we are approaching the end of our time here, which is hard to believe. It's been a very quick hour. So any last kind of words of wisdom or anything else that any other key points that you would like to share?
The big thing is, for me, that I think about is, what you do up front pays off when the bad moments happen. That whole preparedness, creating the rings defense. Corporations do a great job with their business continuity, disaster recovery programs, if they have one, because they're thinking about it. They already have a plan. So when you're emotionally charged, all you do is you look at it going, okay, where are we cutting? And during the times of calmness, during the times when you can think and chew through it, that's the time to be prioritizing and making those decisions, because everyone wants, we're in a society of people first society. And I'm watching these corporations doing they do the best with the ones I enjoy watching, and I'm probably tuning out the ones that aren't doing it. But at the same time, the ones I'm watching, they, in their rings of defense, laying off people is like on the lower end of things. It's the, what programs can we cut? What products can we reform? Things like that. They made a plan up front with those priorities, with who they thought was important. And then, those are the people I applaud that thought through that. And then I encourage other organizations, corporations, nonprofits, civic, state, local governments, whatever. You have to be planned up front. You have to make that time up front. You need, I'm very big about, doing it. What you do during time of peace and calmness pays off in exponential dividends during crisis.
Yeah. So I will put links to your website and social media and everything else in the video description, but I always like to give guests the chance to say, where can people find you?
Okay, so I'm on Instagram, which is leadership_developed. I'm on Facebook, which is leadership space developed. I don't know why I made a mistake with that. I'm on LinkedIn with Eric Landblom. I'm one of the few, Landbloms in the United States. Don't go for the Swedish; those are distant relatives.
Okay.
Then I'm still working on so I have a website, but it's still the Wix, so it's the complicated name of it's going to be landmineusmc.wix.com/leadership developed. But there's a link in my bios of all 3 social medias, so you don't have to remember all of that.
And I will be sure to include the link as well, in the video description for folks who catch this on the replay. But thank you so much, Eric. A lot of great, stories, insight, and lessons for people to apply. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for inviting me. This has been a great adventure, great journey just to meet. When we met, that was one of the greatest opportunities I found as we were growing, as we're starting this business. You helping us springboard from nothing into, being something. Thank you for allowing us to be part of that.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And we'll catch you next time.